Hi everyone, I'm Jordan Lacker and this is my Module 13 case study. In this case we have a veteran teacher. She's a former Teacher of the Year in a smaller rural school that's been going through a tough personal matter. Her husband and her have been separated and she's now raising her two teenage children alone. Um, but the principal and the staff have noticed a significant change in her behavior in recent months. And the teacher, Mrs. Horton, has had some conflicts with staff, and staff meetings, as well as meetings with the principal, have been ineffective. Parents have also begun to contact the principal and school board members regarding the behavior of the teacher in the classroom, as well as her lack of communication between the parents and herself. In a recent meeting between the principal, the teacher, Mrs. Horton, and a concerned parent, it did not go well, with Mrs. Horton displaying some unprofessional behavior. She kind of had some outbursts yelling at the parent during that meeting, which left the meeting pretty ineffective. So, in identifying the problem and what we know, first of all, this is a elementary school, Crestview Elementary. It's a rural school with a relatively small staff. It's one of 3 elementary schools in the district. It has great retention of the staff. The staff, as mentioned, had been serving together for 8 years. The staff works well together. They are very proud of their school, have a lot of pride in the school. They do have good test scores, good attendance, and good community support. We know that Mrs. Horton is a skilled educator. She's a former Teacher of the Year for the district. She's experienced some recent life changes that have had some challenges for her life, for sure. And her behavior has recently changed. She's berating staff members, not wanting to try new initiatives for the school. And she's really, those new initiatives, she's really not on board with them, and berates those staff members who are. She's had some recent verbal outbursts towards staff as well as the parent meeting. And there are some parents, the administration, and board members that have some concerns about her behavior. Mrs. Wilson, the principal, she is in her 4th year as a principal at the school. And as a principal overall. She's learned about these issues several months ago, and noticed these issues about spring break time in the previous school year. She has previously talked to Mrs. Horton, but those talks have been ineffective and haven't yielded any real progress. And she has received multiple concerning reports starting about 6 weeks into the school year. She is receiving reports, and then recently got a call from the superintendent saying that several board members have also gotten calls from parents. That she has tried to affirm parents that everything is fine, that this is actually not calm the fears of the parents at all. And she recently arranged a meeting with a parent, and that meeting has not gone well, with the parent leaving upset and nothing being resolved, as well as the teacher, Mrs. Horton, having a outburst during that meeting. So what do we need to know to properly solve this problem? We need to know about the district evaluation process, how the teachers are evaluated when they are, as well as the tenure and due process in the district, if they have tenure or due process in their district. Maybe some of the prior evaluation or walkthrough findings throughout the school, as well as in this particular classroom, Mrs. Horton's particular evaluation. What are her past evaluations or trends in that evaluation stating? What about the number and the history of the accusers? We talked that 4 board members have been contacted. Don't know for sure if that was 4 different parents, maybe the same parent to all 4 board members. But how many are we talking about? How many accusers are we talking about? So mainly it seems like there's quite a few. As well as the history of those accusers. Have they had a past history with this teacher? As maybe other children they've had that have had this teacher? But what's their past history as well? How long has Mrs. Horton been teaching? And it mentioned that the staff has been there for 8 years. Is that about her length of teaching experience, or has she had many more years than that? What is her level of teaching experience? And then have the previous actions that were mentioned in the case study, berating the teachers or the meeting with the superintendent, has any of this been documented before? We need to know just the layout of the school, the facilities. What do they have for options for holding meetings with parents? Are they always held in classrooms, or do they have a conference room that they could go to as well? As well as the scheduled time for the meeting in question, kind of at the end of the case study there. what amount of time was scheduled for this? Were students at the school that day? Was this a limited time for this meeting, or was there just a kind of open-ended? What are the previous relationship of Mrs. Horton and the parents, as well as what was kind of Mrs. Horton's reaction and outcome of the first meeting that the principal had with Mrs. Horton? And then just over, why is she not communicating in this case? Is it because of the personal matters in the school, or are there some other matters going on as well? And furthermore, what have Mrs. Horton's other actions been? Besides this, have we seen any other actions that she has had? Any positive actions as well within the school? What help may she need? What kind of help can we provide her? If we determine she needs some help, what kind of help can we provide her? We need to look at how student learning has been affected. Student achievement data should be looked at here, as well as would moving the student to solve this problem. The parent would like their student to be moved from one class out of Mrs. Horton's class to another, but would that solve this problem? Would it actually be a solution or not? And then how can we rebuild this trust? So in identifying the problem, really Mrs. Wilson, the principal, has been slow to realize these problems. Over a period of months, they've just kind of escalated, and to this point here that we're at. In which case, she may be kind of unaware of what is actually occurring in the school. So the strong affirmation of Mrs. Horton that Mrs. Wilson has provided to Mrs. Horton, it has not calmed parents' fears, and probably will not calm parents' fears. In fact, it may actually make things worse. It may actually make it seem that she doesn't really know what's happening in her school. So she needs to take control of this situation. And we need to rebuild this trust between the parents and the administration, as well as the parents and this teacher, and the students and the teacher. With Mrs. Horton, Mrs. Horton has been unprofessional. No doubt about it, she's been unprofessional, be berating teachers, which should not happen, or the outburst with this parent, which definitely should not happen. The home life may be affecting her work, or it may be a completely different issue. Parents and students are unhappy with the performance of this teacher. Mrs. Horton is not communicating with these parents. And Mrs. Horton is not willing to try new initiatives of the school. Not willing to be a team member, play a role in the shared vision of that school. And so, again, Mrs. Horton's trust needs to be rebuilt between parents, the students, and the staff. And then we have an immediate problem here. The first thing that needs to be looked at is the situation is escalating. Assuming that school is in session during the day of this meeting, that she had the outburst with the parent, the students are feeling unsafe. Mrs. Horton is visibly upset to the point where she should not go back to class that immediately. If students are coming back to class shortly, Mrs. Horton may need to be removed for the day from that classroom. And the meeting between the parent, Mrs. Horton, and Mrs. Wilson did not do anything to cause or ease the parents' concerns. In fact, it may have escalated them. So in resolving this problem, the first step, if we have school in session and students are coming back, we need to get a substitute for Mrs. Horton. Student safety at this point, right, immediately is a primary concern. We need to spend some time with Mrs. Horton in the office this day. Or if she cannot do it this day, the next day, and she can have a sub for the next day as well. We need to cover problems that she's having with the staff, cover problems that she's having with new school initiatives, cover past parent allegations, as well as the failed meeting with Mr. Stafford. Step 2 is we need to create an action plan going forward with the goals, strategies, as well as the evidence we're going to look at to see if this plan is working. It needs to include a supervision and evaluation of Mrs. Horton and her classroom, as well as reviewing student data and evaluation data, making sure that students are succeeding and excelling to the point of school expectations in her class. We need to cover specific support that Mrs. Horton's going to need. Concentrate on the support that the school and the district can provide. She may need some support that the school and district cannot provide her. We can help her find those options, but we need to concentrate on the support that the school and the district can provide Mrs. Horton. As well as professional development can be one sort of those supports. What kind of professional development may she need to further succeed and get back to being a great teacher? Now we need to work for everyone to take responsibility for their actions. This must happen to build the rapport with and confidence in teaching. Everyone has to admit that they have had some mistakes here, and then we can maybe start to rebuild those relationships that have maybe been affected. In this case, a letter of reprimand should definitely be considered by Mrs. Wilson for Mrs. Horton, but we only should refer to the current incident. There may have been several incidents that have happened with Mrs. Horton, but we need to refer only to the current incident and not bring back those other incidents from the past. If they didn't warrant a letter at that point, they don't warrant it right now. Contact the superintendent about the incident and the plan of action, and consider placing a full-time aide in the classroom. It could be that maybe one of the things that is happening is this class is just a very difficult class to deal with, and an extra adult in that classroom could help Mrs. Horton, as well as calm and ease the tension in the classroom. We need to document the observation and progress that is made, continue to support her, and support good teaching that Mrs. Horton offers, but not support her unconditionally. We must also be able to admit that when something is wrong. And this may warrant some time off, or a support system in the school may be warranted. She may need someone to talk to. That could be the principal. It could be somebody else in the school. Or she may need a little bit of time off to sort through her personal matters to help get her on the right track again. If Mrs. Horton refuses the substitute immediately or the meeting with the principal, at this point we probably need to contact the superintendent and human resources to review the situation and check to see if the superintendent supports a suspension with pay. At this point, if she's not willing to help, this situation has escalated to the point where it may be warranted a suspension with pay as we look at the termination process. Step 5, I think we need to keep the students in place. There's a difference between if one parent is asking or if we have multiple parents have been reporting issues with Mrs. Horton. If multiple parents, which it sounds like multiple parents have been reporting issues, if multiple parents have been reporting those issues and we move one student out, we may have a domino effect where we might have many parents that are demanding then their student be removed from the classroom. One student, we could move to a new classroom if one parent or one student was really having a difficulty, but moving half or more of the class is going to be not possible. We need to then contact and follow up with Mr. Stanton. Convey with him that a plan is in place. Convey with him that there is something wrong. We realize that. We have a plan to correct that. And then actually convey that Julie's going to stay. Julie, his daughter, was going to stay in place at the time, but please to stay in touch with the principal, Mrs. Horton, and just convey to the principal if things are not improving, but we can take steps at that point. We have just to convey that there is a plan, trying to build that trust back up. The next step would be for the principal to observe Mrs. Horton when she's back in the classroom teaching. This may be many class periods. It may be even multiple days. We need to decipher if additional supports are necessary. This could be a case where the principal is in the room observing. They could even be working on some emails, but just that presence in that room to see what maybe other supports that Mrs. Horton may need. And we need to be looking for evidence of improvement during these observations. The next step after these observations, I can meet with Mrs. Horton outside of class, discuss the observation, areas of improvement, include specific strategies and plans, provide and implement necessary supports, and then we need to then continue frequent walkthroughs and observations, and not just in Mrs. Horton's room, but throughout the school. The principal needs to have a better understanding of what is happening in the school. Mentioned that she has never seen these outbursts or anything bad from Mrs. Horton, but it seems like that maybe this is happening. If many students are reporting this, it may be happening still. And then ensure that the implementation of all the strategies. And so part of how we can get that data from the school is using those walkthroughs, and that can help guide what is needed for professional development, how the principal can provide effective professional development for the staff as well as Mrs. Horton. Gauging student achievement, how student achievement is happening, the implementation of school strategies, the strategies that the whole school is using, as well as just getting a clearer picture of the school operations, what is needed, areas that the school is doing well in as well. And then for Mrs. Wilson, Mrs. Wilson needs to continue and review and evaluate the situation. Just because there's a plan does not mean that that's the end of her role. She needs to check up on this. She needs to support and reward quality education and teaching, but do not defend poor job performance. It's kind of a thin line to walk with as a principal. She needs to take responsibility for poor job performance. Ultimately, it's her responsibility for that job performance of the teachers. If they're not doing their job, she also is not doing her job. She needs to show empathy to those parental concerns and not just assure them that everything is fine when they're clearly not, but admit that things are not going well and we need to come up with a plan to change those. So we need to provide assurance that the issue will be resolved. And we need to work to recognize the problems before they escalate to this point, and then take control of that situation. She needs to take control of that situation. For example, asking the parent what he wants to get out of this meeting is not going to lead to probably too effective of a meeting. How do we resolve the issue? Based on promoting the success for all students. In this case, removing Mrs. Horton after the parent meeting provided that safe learning environment. She was probably not ready to teach, obviously, that day. Things would not have gone well with those students. So by removing her, we're providing a safer learning environment for those students. High-quality teachers are important to learning. If we can keep Mrs. Horton in the classroom, she is a good teacher. She has a history of being a great teacher. And so if we can keep her in the classroom and get back to that great teaching, that's going to be the best option. The aid may help that classroom environment. So the aid, as we put an aid in there, that may help that classroom environment, just another adult presence in that classroom. Administrators must take control. So administrators taking control of the situation can kind of help prevent it from escalating further. Ensure the fairness in treatment of all the stakeholders. Empathy needs to be shown to these parents. They have concerns. They had some valid concerns. And so showing empathy towards these parents can help this process. We need to enable and establish clear communication channels. Communicate with parents on the resolution and future problems. Open those communication channels so the parents feel comfortable contacting the principal. Parents weren't contacting the principal at this point, and so a lot of them were contacting school board members directly. And so when you're getting bypassed on the communication, it indicates that the communication channel is ineffective. The one that is being used is definitely ineffective. We need to have the input of the stakeholders is heard and valued. The parents have valid concerns about their children. They just want what's best for their children in this case. And so we need to hear those concerns, not just assure them that everything is fine. We need to continue monitoring communication with the staff. Make sure that the strategies that are to benefit students are actually implemented, and make sure that a plan is followed. So there needs to be some responsibility and follow-up in this process. And working towards a collaborative and successful future, we create steps to work with parents instead of against them. Working with the parents to have a solution is going to be your best bet to get a solution which everyone feels comfortable with. We need to keep all stakeholders informed in that process as well. We need to create steps to spur the teacher and parent communication. It says that there's no parent communication, teacher-parent communication here. So we need to take those steps to ensure that if a parent is trying to reach out to a teacher, that they are able to reach them. And this helps ensure that the principal has a better picture of the school as well by doing those walkthroughs, It creates a walkthroughs and observations. It creates more of a better picture of the school for the principal, that they're able to see what the needs of the school are. And maybe things need to be changed. It promotes personal responsibility. Everyone here has a personal responsibility to help these students. And by having that evaluation, observation, walkthroughs, and looking at the student achievement data, we can see that there is a personal responsibility aspect here. And so if someone is not meeting their personal responsibility, what are we going to do to help them? Or what are we going to do to then find somebody who will? And then create some clear guidelines for teachers to follow so they can better help their students. In this case, what was I thinking? Kind of thinking that there are a lot of complaints here by parents, but yet the principal has never seen any direct witness to this, or heard of it besides from these parents. I was also thinking that no matter what the outcome of this situation, it has escalated to the point that someone is going to be unhappy no matter what the decision is made. No matter what decision is made, someone's going to be unhappy about it here. The actions of this principal, the school, the teacher, they're kind of reactive and not proactive. The principal kind of seems to be a hands-off kind of at this moment, kind of not rocking the boat at this point. And the school has a history of good test scores, but that does not mean that things don't need to change or should change. Education is not stagnant, and so things do need to change. Even if the school has a history of good test scores and good retention of staff, as well as attendance and good community support. And the staff may not feel comfortable conveying needs. No one from the staff really has talked to this principal. The principal doesn't seem too aware, and so maybe the staff doesn't feel that that communication channel isn't open for the staff. What was I feeling here? I was feeling concern for the well-being of the students in this classroom and of the staff. It doesn't seem like things are happening that the staff may feel threatened in this case, and they may not feel like they're getting backed up. I was feeling the parents had some valid concerns. I was feeling the principal definitely needed to be more involved in the school, and I was feeling the situation could have been prevented just by being more proactive and acting when issues first arose, instead of kind of ignoring those and hoping that they would correct themselves. By acting when they first arose, we could have prevented maybe a lot of this. And what was I valuing? I really was valuing a caring and dedicated staff. I think it's kind of rare for a staff to be together for 8 years. I know that in my education, my educational career, I have not had a staff that has been together for 8 years, which means it's an experienced staff. So most of the time, things aren't going to rattle this staff as much as maybe a newer staff. So that's beneficial for an administrator. I value the concerned and dedicated parents. There are those parents, they want what's best for their children. And a parent that's showing concern and coming to the school is an involved parent. And I think that helps out their children a great deal. And then a supportive community. A community that supports the school, school initiatives. It creates an atmosphere that is much better for the students. Issues that are still unresolved. Mrs. Horton's personal life is still going to be unresolved. She's gonna have to figure that out. There may be some things that the school can provide to help her, but there may be some things that aren't. If her and her husband are no longer together, and she is the primary breadwinner, then at this point, or the only breadwinner of the home, then that creates some money issues. The school may not be able to help solve those money issues for Mrs. Horton, but they may be able to help solve some other issues that she may have. Other unresolved issues are just open for further investigation would be her response to the improvement plan. Will she be able to regain the teaching prowess that she once had? Will she be willing to work towards that? Or is she really not going to be willing to work towards it at this point? The parent's response to the proposed plan. How is the parent going to respond to this plan? Not going to get what they want with their daughter being removed from the classroom, but how are they going to respond to that? As well as the superintendent and board support if further action is needed. If we need to look towards a suspension with pay and maybe a non-renewal of a contract, how is the superintendent board going to look at that? As well as the professional development needs of the staff. What kind of professional development is going to be offered for this staff? How did the building administrator promote the academic success of every student? Well, it helps by maintaining the familiarity and increasing the structure by keeping Mrs. Horton in the classroom. The students are more familiar with this at this time, and we can rebuild those relationships hopefully. Setting clear academic and professional standards, not just for Mrs. Horton, but for the entire school to follow. It only helps the learning of students. By placing the accountability on staff and the administration, using student achievement data, placing some of that accountability on them, that can help in the teaching process as well. That student achievement data probably shouldn't come from one source though, multiple sources. The evaluation and observation and use of frequent walkthroughs can help the principal get a better sense of the school, the whole climate of the school, and what the needs of the school are, which can lead to the professional development needs of the staff. What type of professional development needs to be offered for this staff? How did the building administrator promote the personal well-being of every student? First of all, we got to repair relationships with parents and students. Relationships have been shown to play a large part in student achievement and student learning, and so rebuilding those relationships with the teachers and students can play a large role in their academic success. We need to ensure the improvement plan is followed by Mrs. Horton. Checkups and looking for evidence that it actually is followed, implemented and followed, as well as the professional development needs of the staff. Providing the right professional development for this staff will only help the student achievement of this school. But further, you also have to make sure that the professional development or the strategies learned at the professional development are implemented into the classrooms of the school. The administration needs to act immediately on troublesome behavior, not hope that it will correct itself over time, but act immediately on that. And communicate often and effectively. It seems like the communication is definitely an issue in this case. How did the building administrator enhance the instructional capacity? By conducting frequent walkthroughs and observations and providing feedback, the principal gets a better picture of the school as well as the staff of what the principal wants to see. The principal continually working towards improvement and not just maintaining the status quo is important here. It's important that even if things are successful, they can be better. And so, just by not wanting to rock the boat is a poor administrative style. We need to provide the necessary supports to teachers that they can work towards. But if things aren't going well, we need to be able to admit that and find a plan to correct that. And by this process is explored and promote the quality education by embracing new programs, having new programs come into the school. It's not bad to try new programs to help students learn. Students do not stay the same year after year after year, just like education is not stagnant. And so new programs can help students reach a more or a higher academic level. And we need to maintain administrative control. The principal needs to take action and take control of the situations. That is with the staff and with parents, and run the meeting, and not let parents run that. Just some of the final thoughts of this. It's a tough position for a principal to be in. You want to support and reward quality education, but not support bad teaching. You want to support your staff if they are wanting to try new initiatives, but you also need to be able to recognize and admit that when the staff is not performing to the level that is required. So we can't defend poor job performance. We must take accountability for the staff, for their action or inaction. And we must provide assurances to parents that there is a problem. We do recognize this problem, and we are taking steps for this to be corrected. Ultimately, this does fall on the shoulders of the administrator. And so, overall, we just need to take control of this situation.